There have been so much hype about beat-up houses on sale that are selling for cheap, some even at $1. Is it worth it? What can you do with it? Let's find out. Hey, Han here, host of Bite Size Investments, and I share financial tips to help you achieve financial freedom. I recently went on a short trip to Japan, and being a property investor, cheap Japan houses, also known as AKIYA, have definitely intrigued me, so I took some time to research it. In this video, I'll share with you what is an AKIYA, why is it so cheap, what are the opportunities, what are the risks, what to look out for, and what can you do with these cheap houses. But first, do note that this is not investment advice. AKIYA literally means empty houses in the Japan language. It is usually an abandoned houses that has sat vacant for a long time. How do AKIYAs come about? Two main reasons. Firstly, it's because of Japanese aging population. When seniors move to smaller houses or care facilities or pass away, there is no younger generations to inherit the senior houses. Secondly, people prefer to buy newer built houses in urban areas because it takes a ton of money to renovate older properties, which may not be worth it since older properties may not conform to newer building standards such as the earthquake standards. And this causes a lack of demand in older houses. One man's trash is another man's treasure. While it is unwanted and has no value as a primary residence for a local Japanese, it does not mean it has no value at all. We see value with our minds, not our eyes. So what are the things we can do to create value for these unwanted houses? As mentioned, some of these AKIYAs are in farmland rural areas and there's simply no human traffic at all. On first glance, it might be impossible to create or find values in these properties. But I have personally witnessed the possibilities. These houses can be converted into niched Airbnb or short-term rentals. As a nature lover, during my last trip to rural Japan in Hokkaido, I had the opportunity to stay in a couple of Airbnbs that were so rural there was not a single neighbor nearby. These are thematic style Airbnbs. It makes sense because it is still relatively close to certain tourist attractions. For example, the AKIYA National Park, Shiritoko National Park, and theme is what attracts people to such places. While most of the older domestic tourists prefer hotels and ryokans, niched thematic Airbnbs are suitable for international and domestic tourists. In one of a farm-themed style Airbnb, which was a duplex like a semi-D, one of my neighbors was a local Japanese tourist. For the Airbnb, it cost us about $300 per night and we stayed there for 5 nights. Assume a 50% occupancy for the entire year and operating expenses eating up about 40% of your revenue. That's still a potential $32,000 of annual net profit for the entire year. Not bad for a rural real estate that nobody wants. While you may think that it is impossible to find such a deal, let me show you an example. Take a look at this 96 square meter house in rural Abashiri sitting on a 2,300 square meter land with a huge land plot that can park at least 10 cars in the driveway. This property also comes with a huge barn at the side for your imagination to run wild on. This house is currently listed at 780 Japan yen, which is about 78,000 Singapore dollars. Considering that it has been sitting on the market for 2 years already, surely there is room for negotiation for a more favorable price after this property has sat on the market for 2 years. Having said that, not all AKIYAs are found in rural farmland areas. There are some that are also in small city town centers. While these houses can still be converted into Airbnbs, another way is to convert them into commercial or retail sites. For example, houses at road intersections have higher traffic flows, so you can rent it out as offices, shops like barber stores, cafes, etc. But note that you need to structure your rental property properly in order to rent it out to such businesses. This is a 7-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 150 square meter house sitting on a 1,100 square meter huge garden in downtown Bihoro, a small town 40 minutes away from Abashiri. It is situated right beside a park that has great nearby amenities, 2 to 5 minutes drive away from restaurants and grocery stores, and is 13 minutes away from the nearest domestic airport, the Membabetsu Airport. The condition of the property is still pretty good, although some of it looks a bit outdated. It is listed for 1.3 million Japan yen, which is about 130,000 Sing dollars. According to the realtor, this was listed for sale for more than 2 years already, so there is also definitely a lot of room for negotiation for this property. You can convert the rooms into either an Airbnb or mixed use. For example, renting out the lower part of the house to a vet or photography studio and the top as Airbnb or for your own stay. Speaking of own stay, you can always convert it into your vacation home for a more peaceful and quality annual getaway. One thing to highlight about working with the professionals here are that they are really professionals. They work very hard, in fact exceedingly beyond our expectations, sending us multiple listings that fit our criteria, and they drove for multiple hours just to view the properties with us, and they even put in many hours just to convert and translate the Japanese renovation documents into something that we could read in English. Contractors are also very professionals. They itemize their renovation cost, showing transparency in their scope of work. This creates a lot of trust for us as we then can look at all the individual items and do our comparisons and research. Furthermore, when we were doing our property viewing, the contractors made themselves available the entire day for us, driving hours across different cities to meet us so that we can have our renovation queries answered on the spot. Houses can be purchased under your name as a foreigner, or you can incorporate a company and buy the property in the company's name. In Japan, foreigners are allowed to own land. Take note that financing might be challenging as a foreigner. You either pay full cash, which usually is much cheaper than the ABSD cost in Singapore, or you try to establish a loan from a Singapore lender to fund the Japan property. Although this might be a very challenging route because usually lenders will not take the risk to lend on a beat up property in a foreign land. And there are also schemes from the contractors that allows you to take a loan from them as they help you to renovate and build your house. But this depends on your relationship with them. Do note that some of these houses may have conditions attached to it. For example, they may need you to be a farmer in order to be able to buy the property, or they may need you to obtain permission from the agricultural committee before you can buy it, or that these houses may not have utilities hookup or have zoning conflicts. So do check with your realtors before you make a move on the properties. Also note that there are taxes such as registration tax and property acquisition tax that you have to pay for on top of the renovation cost. However, as mentioned, all these costs normally do not add up to more than above the additional buyer's stamp duty ABSD that you may be incurred on if you were to buy your second investment property in Singapore. I was also told that some of these houses were sold for about $1 just because if the seller doesn't sell, he will continue to incur the property taxes. That's why if you were to buy it from them, it's a win-win situation. You relieve them of the need to pay for property taxes. You will then obtain an asset that you are able to turn around and make money on, and the government is able to get an owner that will rejuvenate and bring vibrancy and traffic to the neighborhood. For such cases, when buying a $1 or $0 property, you will need the buy-in of your realtor or property agent because these people work for a commission, and if you buy it at $1, what commission are they getting? They will end up working for free for this case, but there are workarounds. The usual understanding is that they can help you negotiate for like $0 or $1 on the basis that you work with them on the contracting side. And then that's where they receive commission from the contractor. And why would they do that? It's because usually for $1 or $0 properties, the property is usually in a very bad condition. So that means that there is a need for a lot of work on the property. So when the contractors come and do, it will be substantial work, and therefore they are able to make some commissions paid to the realtor or the property agent that is working with you to negotiate for a $0 or $1 sales. So what are the risks? Depending on the area, most of Japan properties have low or zero resale value. So make sure you factor this into your financial projections before you make the move. As a norm, The value from Japan properties derive from land and the property itself. So properties usually rapidly decline in value. The infrastructure, the build-up decline in value in 30 years time, while the land appreciates at a very slow rate. Also note that these abandoned houses are usually neglected and vacant for a very long time, and they are usually very outdated. So some of the building codes might be also outdated, which means that they do not conform with today's earthquake standards. So if you were to buy and do the renovation, you may incur a lot of costs just so that it meets today's building code, like the earthquake standards that I mentioned. So for such houses, never go for full asking price, people. Negotiate, try to go as low as you can. Speaking of earthquake, you may need to consider if you want to buy an investment in an earthquake or tsunami prone areas, as your investment risk are increased, and these places may also increase your mortgage insurance. Also note that these cheap houses may not be in the best location. It may be inconvenient and lack several amenities, like the rural thematic one that I've showed you earlier. Also note that because these are in very small cities and small towns, rural areas, people in these areas may not be able to speak English. They are predominantly Japanese speaking locals. So be prepared to be able to read and write and communicate in Japan, or find a good translator. And operating overseas, there may be a chance for you to be scammed, although unlikely due to Japanese etiquette. But still, you have to practice cautious. So do make sure you vet your team properly. For all the options that I've shared, my preferred model would be the niched Airbnb, as the returns look incredibly attractive. But take note that short-term rentals aren't entirely passive. It is quite operationally intensive. For example, it requires you to aggressively market the property out on the different renting platforms, communicate with the prospective tenants on the instructions of the check-in, check-out, and the rules of the do's and don'ts of the property, and then after that, do a good service in order to get great reviews. And when the guests move out, you will need to manage the cleaners to go in and clean the property in order to prepare for the next guest to come in. And so you need a proper process and systems in order to run it remotely or when you're there. So it is definitely not for the faint-hearted. But is it worth it? If I were planning to relocate to Japan and I intend to carve out a portion of my property to stay and to rent out as Airbnb, I will most definitely say yes, because the returns do look attractive to some extent. And I have personally traveled to Japan before, and I love the weather, the food, the people there. And the quality of life there is something that I look forward to. So what do you think of such investment opportunities? Is this something that you would try, or would you do something different? Let me know by leaving down in the comments below. So there you have it. I've shared with you what a cheap AKIYA home is, why is it so cheap, what are the opportunities, what are the risks, and what you can do about it. Do give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you think that I've given you value in this video, and share with a friend who needs to see this. You can also check out my other videos here and here. I thank you for your time. I wish you a very good day. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.